Time-traveling woman threw 4-year-old Ayu into the deep mountains after a blizzard to seize the opportunity. Fortunately, a kind-hearted person took it in. The Wang family was so poor that they were jingling, sick and disabled, and still owed a huge debt. However, from top to bottom, they all doted on her like pearls and treasures. Everyone said that the Wang family picked up a loser and played it out together sooner or later. Unexpectedly, this group pet doll is really a little lucky treasure. Xiao Ayu took out her small pocket and smiled sweetly. You have everything you want, including personal space, top-notch spiritual spring, and spirit-testing treasure mouse. Ayu has it. There is revenge, there is kindness to repay kindness. This lucky treasure is amazing. It's not only a farming expert, but also a business expert. It can also open academies, trade with the sea, and establish aristocratic kindergartens, earning the favor of all staff with its skills. Watch the team's beloved Fubao turn the tide and take the family to the pinnacle of life. The time-traveling woman and a group of villains were dumbfounded. It turns out they are the ones who missed the golden finger. Keywords of the novel. Tuanchong Fubao has space without pop-ups, Tuanchong Fubao has space. Download the complete collection of TXT, Tuanchong Fubao has space. Latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. Preface. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Preface. In the 16th year of the Ming dynasty, in the northernmost part of Dechan Kingdom, snow began to fall in early winter and lasted for a whole month. The surrounding mountain ranges are covered in pure white snow. This place has long been sparsely populated, with birds disappearing and people disappearing. But there was a horse driving in the snow, very fast, because the snow was too thick, the horse couldn't run anymore. Two people wearing black cloaks got off the horse, holding a white object in their arms. They hurriedly walked in the snow, occasionally looking around. All right, just leave it here casually. We've already walked 200 miles, no matter how far we go, we'll have to climb over the mountain. Ah, I still can't bear it, after all. Taking people's money and helping them with disaster relief, there's not so much nonsense. We'll lose it soon, and we'll have to rush back to stay overnight. It's really freezing to death on such a cold day. Not long after, with a loud bang, something was thrown into the snow. The two of them didn't even look at it, rubbed their hands and hurriedly walked towards the horse. Wang Chuanfu and Wang Chuanman were walking down the road with their heads down when they suddenly heard the sound of horse hooves not far away. Before the two could react, Wang Chuanman was hit hard and stumbled for a few steps, only to see that the horse didn't stop and immediately walked away. Fourth brother, are you okay? Wang Chuanfu immediately stepped forward to take a look. Wang Chuanman patted the snow on his body and stood up. There's nothing wrong with it. You're dressed thick, and the snow is also thick. Big brother, let's go quickly. It's getting colder and colder this day. Maybe there will be another heavy snow before it gets dark. It's better to go back quickly. At this moment, the sky was drizzling with light snow, and the two brothers didn't bother to cover it up. Not long after they left, Wang Chuanman suddenly kicked something under his feet. Oh, it seems like a package. The thing was originally on the snow, covered with a thin layer of snow. Because it is white, it is not easy to be detected. Wang Chuanfu also lowered his head and said, it's not like those two people lost it, is it? Look at them running so fast, maybe the package fell off the horse. Wang Chuanman was also anxious and said, oh, what should we do? We don't have horses and can't catch up with them. Take it back to the village chief first, let's wait until the snow melts. Wang Chuanfu sighed, we haven't finished our own business yet. As the two brothers spoke, they went to pick up the white package, only to find it was a piece of white velvet. The velvet fabric was torn open at a corner, and the contents rolled out directly, falling straight on the snow. He is a child who dresses thinly and looks only 1 or 2 years old. Perhaps he was hurt by the fall, his tightly closed eyes slightly half open, like a weak deer looking at the world. His bright eyes had not yet fully exposed, but quickly closed again. His face was flushed, like a ripe persimmon, and his breath seemed to be absent. Oh, it's a doll. With just one glance, the two big men dared not look much. It was icy and snowy, so trembling, I'm afraid it wouldn't be good. Wang Chuanman was in a hurry and quickly spread the velvet cloth on his body, then went to retrieve the doll on the ground. Damn it! Hurry up, wrap it up. Wang Chuanfu also saw it and didn't care about anything else. He instinctively took off the coarse cloth scarf from his neck and wrapped the velvet cloth around it. Wang Chuanman did the same, and both of their fingers were cold, afraid to touch the temperature of the doll. After only a few breaths, the two men were startled into a cold sweat. Big brother, why is this doll's face so red? Is it getting hot? Wang Chuanman is only 23 years old this year, and his family is poor. He only married his wife 2 years ago and has not been able to give birth to a baby in the past 2 years. He doesn't even understand those things. I'm afraid it's going bad, this doll has a fever. The little nephew of Uncle Air's family had a fever like this last year and died of it. Hurry up, go home and show me. Wang Chuanfu patted Wang Chuanman's shoulder and picked up all the miscellaneous things in his hand, letting him hold the child with peace of mind. The two quickly headed towards Hujia village ahead. Hujia village is located on the northeast side of this mountain, with rugged and difficult mountain roads, and even more perilous on snowy days. Fortunately, the two brothers have become accustomed to walking and can't even fall with their eyes closed. They were supposed to walk in the snow for half an hour, but it only took them 3/4 of an hour to arrive. As soon as I arrived at the village entrance, I saw old master Hu walking trembling under the yellow horn tree, holding a big smoking stick with his hands behind his back. There are 2 roads at the village entrance. One leads to the bottom of the cliff, and another 2 miles leads to the Tsiujiang River. The Tsiujiang River has fast water and there are no boats available. One is to the right, which is also the only way to the outside world in the village. Wang's descendants, have you caught something good? Grandpa Hu asked loudly when he saw the 2 brothers, one carrying something for hunting and making traps, and the other holding something tightly in their arms. This sound attracted some people in the village to poke their heads out of their doorstep, but only to poke their heads out. On such a cold day, a family without thick clothes cannot leave. Wang Chuanman touched the snow on his face and quickly replied, "We're picking up a doll outside." What? You're starving crazy, even eating dolls. This is not acceptable, our village doesn't have such rules. Grandpa Hu widened his eyes. He knew that some people in the village were starving in the snow and had already started eating dolls. Their village cannot break this example. No, no, no. Wang Chuanfu shouted, "Mr. Hu, this kid has a fever. We need to take him back to show him to the old lady as soon as possible. If only Dr. Hu was here, we could also show him." Auntie shouted from the window, "Boss of the Wang family, have you found a male doll? Are there still too few male dolls in your family? Is she a girl?" Wang Chuanfu was not quite sure. The doll's cheeks turned red from the burning, her eyes closed tightly, and her lips peeled, making it difficult to tell if it was a boy or a girl. But judging from the dolls he had seen at home, such a beautiful one must be a female doll. They don't have any female dolls in their family. Oh my, what are you doing? Hurry up and lose it. What are you doing with the girl doll when you pick it up? You're a loser. The aunt sneered, "Your family is starving to death. Why are you picking up the girl doll back? Your mother must be infuriated by you." Before the aunt could finish speaking, she heard a high-profile soprano next to her. "Jiang Dahua, if you don't close your stinky mouth, I'll throw feces in your mouth." What bad luck, compensate, why didn't you compensate your old Jiang family in the ancestral tomb? Boss, Fourth, what are you doing with that pestle? Get back to me. On the snowy ground of the dam in the middle of the village, an old lady wearing a brown cotton jacket was standing with her hips crossed. Although there were still 400 to 500 meters away from here, the sound was extremely penetrating and reached everyone's ears. Wang Chuanfu and Wang Chuanman dared not delay any longer. They greeted the people here and quickly ran along the village road. Mrs. Wang saw her two sons approaching and extended her hand. Give it to me. Wang Chuanfu frowned and gently lifted the things in his hand, saying, Mom, we didn't wear anything when we went out this time. The snow is too heavy. I know you two are unreliable. By the time you come back with your set of things, your mother will have already passed the first 7. Mrs. Wang's eyes were almost turning to the sky. The old lady glared fiercely at Wang Chuanman and picked up the doll he was protecting in his arms. Her movements were gentle, but her mouth didn't soften at all. After picking up the doll, I don't know how to get home quickly. What's going on with those things? They're all restless and can't even do good things perfectly. Thank you for calling Chuanman. You idiot. Newcomers joining, please provide more support. Momoda, end of this chapter. Chapter 2. Adoption. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2 Adoption. Lao Wang's family built a courtyard slightly inside Hu family village, with a hanging wall on their back. Old Wang is leading his family to shovel snow. Third wife, come to my room. Mrs. Wang let out her voice as soon as she walked into the yard. Wang Chuanfu and Wang Chuanman were worried about the doll, and just as they were about to follow, they were scared away by the old lady's gaze. Why, follow me to get some milk. Mrs. Wang glared, go ahead and work. A group of starving ghosts reincarnated while eating, and I didn't see you move while working. The two brothers touched their noses and turned their heads in response. Old Wang looked at his eldest son who was taking over the snow plowing and said, Did your mother have another firefight today? I'm just worried about my two sons. I go out 3 times a day to see them, but I'm getting angry again. Wang Chuanman casually said, No, my mother is worried about that little doll. It's too cold today, so we need to be more careful. Before he could finish speaking, old Wang shouted loudly, What? What doll? Now, the whole family knew that the two brothers had not caught their prey, but instead picked up a doll and came back. My family stopped shoveling the snow and headed all the way to the lobby room. Soon, the already small hall suddenly became full. How about 1 basket? Bring 2 more. What else are you cooking? You'll starve to death if you eat later. Who's bothering me anymore? Don't want to eat late tonight. Why is this snowy day burning so badly? Do we need to open the window? Why don't you open a window on your mind? Worry about it, get out of here. Second child, go see if your father has brought Dr. Hu here. He's actually sturdy and works slowly, and his mother is chirping. The waves of noisy voices made Ayu's dizzy head briefly clear. Since she started remembering things, it seems like she hasn't been so lively before. Did sister and the others find new playmates? It snowed, and she fell ill again. She always loves to get sick. Remember, before going to bed, sister brought her a glass of water, and shortly after drinking it, she fell asleep. Ayu felt so hot, she raised her little hand and instinctively rubbed it against her eyes. My eyes are so itchy and painful. Did she sleep too long again? Sleeping too long will result in no food to eat. Hungry stomach, so uncomfortable. Auntie. Ayu's voice was hoarse, and her squeezed voice was as delicate as a mosquito's. Wang Xilang, who was almost laying his head on her face, was the first to hear it and immediately turned his head to shout, Ah Nai, it seems that the doll is awake. The next moment, a bunch of heads leaned over and looked at the doll embedded in the patched bedding. The little doll has a rosy face, pitifully small, not as big as an adult's palm. It looks like at most 2 years old. When she closed her eyes, the most attractive thing was the small yet erect nose. Then came the thick fan-shaped eyelashes, with a full forehead. The child's skin color was needless to say, but it was smoother and more tender than any other doll in the village. The doll's mouth was dry and peeling, and the second wife Ma was a careful person. She dipped her handkerchief in water and gently moistened the doll's lips. The flipped skin was temporarily pressed down, revealing a cherry-like little mouth. Cherry-sized, also as pink and cute as ripe cherries. Now, the doll has opened its eyes. The Wang family all took a deep breath. These are not eyes that humans can have. In the dark pupils, there was a faint golden hue, which seemed to have been obscured by illness. That shouldn't be the pupil color that Dachang people should have. It's indescribably beautiful, yet with a hint of strangeness. The adults of the Wang family hadn't spoken yet, but the 7 boys started shouting. Wow, these are the eyes that fairies only have. So beautiful, ah Nai, let's take care of her. In the future, I will eat less rice, no, eat less than half a bowl of rice, and take care of her. I'll also eat half a bowl less and leave it for my sister to eat. How do you know it's my sister? So pretty, it must be my younger sister. Hu Sanbao's younger sister from the village head's family is not as pretty. We also have a pretty sister. Mrs. Wang remained silent, with a calm face, lost in thought. My family is really poor, it's not just about picking up a doll to save lives. Ayu called out to her mother twice, but received no response. As usual, she carefully hid her disappointment and looked around with timid eyes. Cough cough. A coughing sound caught everyone's attention. But the fourth daughter Law, Lu Shi, had a sickly posture and struggled to lean against the door, speaking with a gasp. Mother, let me take care of it. Lu Shi saw Mrs. Wang looking at her and mustered up the courage to say, I had a dream yesterday. In my dream, there was such a child who was said to have been pitied by heaven and given to me. Ayu's eyes fell on Lu Shi at the door. She couldn't see exactly what that person looked like, but her movements around her were extremely similar. Auntie. Ah. Lu heard it for some reason and instinctively responded. As soon as she finished speaking, she burst into tears. It's like the huge ice hole in my heart, suddenly filled with a ball of fire. Wang Laosi hurriedly ran over and helped Lu Shi, feeling extremely distressed. Why did you come out? The doctor said you need to lie down more. Lu squeezed out a weak smile and walked into the room with Wang Laosi's strength, staring at the little doll lying on the mat. So much like, really like the doll she dreamt of. Just the same little one, calling her auntie. Mother, let me take care of it. Lu dared not touch the doll, afraid of passing on the weak energy on her body. She just begged mournfully, let me try. Mrs. Wang pursed her lips, and the whole family looked at her. Several grandchildren even clasped their hands together and made a gesture of praying to the gods and worshipping the Buddha. Like a small yellow dog bowing to the village head. Yang. Mrs. Wang gritted her teeth. Isn't it just a doll? Their old Wang family doesn't have any dolls that can't be raised. Ayu felt a pair of warm hands on her forehead. She rubbed them affectionately and quickly fell asleep again. After deep into the night, the old Wang family still extravagantly lit up the lights, and several wives took turns guarding the bedside, occasionally touching the doll's forehead. No one noticed that the doll's little fingers moved, emitting a faint light that was imperceptible to the naked eye. Treasure, wake up. Ayu opened her eyes and found herself in an incredibly bright place, where there was a lot of food, thick clothes, and a very thick bed next to her. She rubbed her eyes and then rubbed them again. Then, she opened her small mouth and silently made a, wow, mouth shape. Her confused eyes looked around, not knowing why she was here. Bao, this is your space, your conscious world. Whatever you desire in your heart, something will appear here. Ayu's eyes were full of confusion. She really can't understand. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Public Opinion. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3 Public Opinion. I am your exclusive caregiver from the universe. Ayu turned around twice in place, her little eyes blinked hard, but she didn't see who was speaking there. Quickly, a voice came from the air that was furious and seemed to be complaining about something. A white ball appeared, with a pair of furry white wings and a fluffy body. Its eyes were nowhere to be found, and its mouth was also blank. Ayu looked at it and swallowed her saliva. It's a bit like the meatballs that Auntie used to make. I am your good friend, do you know? Ayu understood this sentence, but didn't understand the specific meaning. She shook her head. Even because the other party was a bit aggressive, they shrank their necks in fear. Tuanzi's small wings were all blown up, and in the end, he felt a bit deflated. After a while, it changed its cheerful tone. I am a little elf, a cute little elf, I am your playmate, play with you. Ayu's eyes lit up and she smiled. Playmate, she can understand. Playmate. Ayu reached out her little hand, pointed to herself, and then pointed to Tuanzi. Playmate. The tone was particularly cheerful. Sister has many playmates, but she doesn't have them. Everyone doesn't like to play with her. But sometimes, they also play with themselves, they like to stuff snow into their necks and not let her take it out. He said that he had put too much, so he gave her half more mantu. She likes to eat mantu, so does my wife. I don't know if this playmate likes to throw snow into her neck. If she loses it, can she have half of the mantu over there? Tuanzi trembled weakly in the air twice. It can be seen that this little kid's intelligence seems to be suppressed. Although he is already 4 years old, he appears to have an IQ of only 2 years old. The body is only 2 years old and pitifully thin. Ayu's eyes kept staring at the pile of mantu that stood tall, and there was also a steamed bun. This is something you imagined, you can't eat it, nor can you eat it. Tuanzi reminds you. Unfortunately, Ayujin didn't listen. Tuanzi wanted to teach the little boy how to use space again, so the whole space shook gently. The next moment, Ayu woke up from the bed, and the small heads of the 3 teenagers crowded together, staring at her with wide eyes. The boy on the far left pushed the boy in the middle and said, "It's all your fault for waking up my sister." The young man in the middle looked aggrieved and said, "I just want to touch it and see if my sister is still burning." Only the boy on the far right, in a very soft voice, said to Ayu, "Sister, I am your 5th brother." Ayu was a bit confused, her little head couldn't turn around. Why did I suddenly arrive at this unfamiliar place, and why did some people suddenly say it was my brother? Does Ayu have a brother? Ayu. I don't remember. In fact, 3 days had passed since Ayu woke up, and during these 3 days, the Wang family had almost done everything possible. But what good way can a poor family come up with? But he pulled out his hands to guard it. Old Wang even went to the village chief's house and shamelessly borrowed a sip of wine to wipe Ayu's back. I went to carry Doctor Who from a long distance. The doll was too small, and Doctor Who dared not prescribe medicine. He only gave me some hot food and watched the fate. The eldest daughter La Feng took out a piece of cotton cloth that she had saved up for a long time and made a small bedding for her child, which was at least warmer than the hard, dark mattress. The stubborn Wang family, who were eager to save a doll, may have been moved by the heavens to pull people out of the gates of hell. It is now the 23rd day of the 12th lunar month, but there is no atmosphere of celebrating the Chinese New Year in the village. Coincidentally, on the day Ayu arrived at Hujia village, the continuous heavy snow stopped. On the second day, the sun was shining brightly, and even those who were afraid to go out due to limited clothing at home could come out to stay warm. The Wang family said to everyone, "We have picked up a lucky doll. Look at her, the sun will come out as soon as she comes." After the snow stops, it melts into snow, which is much colder than snowfall, but the sun is strong enough that standing under it for a while can make one sweat profusely. Someone snorted coldly, "Why don't you say it's the kitchen god who went to heaven to plead for mercy? It's not God's business whether it snows or not, is it not God's business? What's the matter with a child?" Some people also earnestly said, "You should take advantage of the lack of snow and send the doll to the charity village early on. It's a blessing or a curse for her to bear on her own. What's wrong with you raising it? You don't have to bring anyone to burden your own family." Every time Mrs. Wang heard these words, she would chase after people with a broom and curse loudly, "Did you eat your rice or chew your bran? If you want to break your mouth like this, did the kitchen god forget to cut off your mouth and bring it up when he went to heaven? I'm afraid the heavens would find it unlucky to see your mouth." The other party was so scolded that they couldn't lift their heads and could only say, "I'm not doing it for your family, why are you still complaining?" Mrs. Wang exclaimed, "I'm doing it for you too. Bring me your rice and noodles, and I'll eat them for you, so you don't have to eat too much all day." The big men in the village often can't afford to argue with face, and women don't have this concern, but no one can win over Mrs. Wang from the old Wang family. Whoever makes others curse and doesn't like to curse 3 times will love to squeeze you, every sentence will make you unable to answer. Aunt Hu-san, who can't win the argument, is cursing at home. If you have the ability, let's argue with each other's ancestors. Let's see who can argue with each other. At this moment when Ayu woke up, Mrs. Wang had just finished an argument with someone and saw several grandchildren crowded in her living room. She greeted them directly with a broom in her hand. "Tell you not to disturb your sister and ignore my mother's words, right? Come here, one buttocks won't open flowers for you. Your grandfather's name will be written upside down today." Old Wang, who is repairing the roof, said, The 7 grandsons of the Wang family, each with a monkey spirit, sneak in every day to see their younger sister. Not to mention them, even other members of the Wang family often go to see it, mainly because the doll looks really beautiful, 1 in every 10 miles. Wang Wulang ran and shouted, "Ah Nai, don't beat me anymore. My sister is awake and she won't burn either." Mrs. Wang threw away the broom in her hand and walked inside in 3 steps in 2. That way, Lu's room also opened, and she quickly walked towards the main room. Not long after, Ayu saw a pile of heads leaning against her. The old lady at the front squeezed out a smile, perhaps because she didn't smile often, she looked a bit ferocious. "Good child, you're awake. What do you want to eat?" Ayu stretched out her right hand, with her index finger on her mouth, and bit nervously. Then, the chin slightly curled inward. In the beautiful eyes like the night, there is a shy feeling of trying to hide. Be extremely well behaved. The people of the Wang family felt like their hearts were melting. Then the little man made of jade timidly said, "Mantu. She is really hungry." The expressions of the Wang family froze completely. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Ling Shui. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4 Ling Shui. You didn't know that in the original place, ordinary mantu, which even dogs didn't eat, was a top rarity that the family couldn't bring out. In the space, Tuanzi was also a bit crazy. It's over, it's over. How could there be such a poor place? So poor, not to mention raising the little ones, even if it's hard to support themselves. Having been sick for a while and also suffering from a fever, Ayu's brain seems to be not as dull as in previous years. Ayu felt that these people could not give her mantu. She swallowed her saliva and quietly covered her stomach with her other hand, then said, "Ayu, you're not hungry anymore." Lu's eyes turned red in an instant, but his family was really poor. How could he make mantu? There is no mantu. My mother will make some soup and egg soup for you, okay? Lu has just given birth, and her family takes pity on her. Every 2 days, they cook a bowl of egg soup for her to nourish her body. There are not many eggs left for the Communist Party. The third wife, Xiao Zhang, also lowered her head and wiped away her tears. If it weren't for them eating the last chicken a few days ago, now the little doll could also take a bite of meat to eat. Fang's cooking skills are good. Seeing that her mother-in-law didn't object, she immediately moved out of the room and went to the stove to cook egg soup. Half a quarter of an hour later, Wang returned with egg soup, and everyone watched as Ayu finished drinking it one by one. An egg boiled a big bowl of soup. There is neither oil nor sugar in it. It is egg vegetable soup boiled in white water. Xiao Ayu was young, holding a soup bowl and taking a small sip. After only taking a few sips, she looked up and said, "I'm full." "You guys drink," he said as he struggled to hold the bowl forward before the adults could speak. Wang Wulang patted his shrunken stomach and said, "Sister, we've had enough to drink long ago. Drink more, you'll grow taller and faster." Xiao Ayu looked at the brother and then at the people in the room, but didn't move. Mrs. Wang said, "Child, you can drink." Lu also nodded beside him. She picked up the bowl again and drank it delicately. After pouring a large bowl of soup into her stomach, she felt a sense of fullness for the first time, holding on to her little belly and feeling somewhat surprised. She took advantage of everyone's lack of attention and poked her stomach with her finger, feeling a bit bloated. A feeling of unfamiliarity and warmth. "They're all scattered, don't work anymore. Is the snow shovel finished? Is the floor finished sweeping?" Mrs. Wang choked heavily in her heart, but she didn't scold anyone, just threw everyone out. After everyone left, Mrs. Wang turned her head and said to Xiao Ayu, "You need to lie down more. You haven't recovered well yet, so don't freeze anymore. In fact, the house is not very warm either. The quilt has been used for more than 10 years and has long been hard, only able to block some wind. How can it be heated? Even if there is a layer of cotton cloth, it is not enough. But it's always warmer than in ice and snow." Xiao Ayu tried hard to listen to the old lady's words, then briefly understood in her mind and nodded obediently. The sisters say she is very stupid, but she is not stupid, she just thinks slowly. "Good child, your name is Ayu, isn't it?" Upon hearing her name, Xiao Ayu widened her eyes a little and nodded again. Mrs. Wang pulled up a somewhat gentle smile at the corner of her mouth and said, "From now on, I'll be your mistress, okay?" "What is Nai?" Xiao Ayu didn't understand, but it didn't prevent her from feeling the other person's kindness. That is a feeling that makes people want to be close. Xiao Ayu nodded under the blanket and said, "Okay." Mrs. Wang left the room satisfied. There are few things to do in winter, and only shoveling snow is the top priority. She also wants to help, everyone shares the workload and saves some effort. To avoid tiring anyone and having nothing to replenish their energy. Little Ayu lay in the room, staring blankly at the pitch-black beams. Nai, should she be similar to Jia and Nyang? She seems to have seen Auntie, but she hasn't seen Auntie again. Sister, if I don't see sister, she doesn't seem very sad either. As little Ayu hesitated and closed her eyes again, Tuanzi in the space became anxious. Hey, don't sleep. Xiao Ayu reluctantly opened her eyes. Is it an elf? Yes, it's me. Come in quickly, I have something to say to you. But Ayu is so tired. If you come in, you won't be tired anymore. You just want to come in, so you can come in, it won't be cold or hungry here, you close your eyes, and then, you want a place. Tuanzi was so anxious that he kept spinning around. Unfortunately, this doll is too small and its intelligence is suppressed. It cannot understand and can only be coaxed. Little Ayu instinctively followed suit, and soon she arrived at the spacious and white place again. This time, there were no beds, clothes or mantu in the room, but there were bowls of egg soup and bowls of egg soup everywhere. Tuanzi Sheng has nothing to love. When you can control your thoughts, these things will be easy to tidy up. Take another look at Xiao Ayu, Tuanzi no longer worries about these things. But instead, he extended his wings and let Xiao Ayu hold her, then led her around the egg soup on the ground and arrived at a green ground. There grew a very cute little seedling, and next to it, there were 2 bowls made of stones. The big one is empty, while the small one is slowly bubbling with water. At this point, Tuanzi stopped talking about the Wanling Shui, which mainly has vitality for restoration. Forget it, she can't understand. Why do you say so much? Anyway, if someone likes you and someone loves you, this water will appear here. It tastes great. Do you want to give it a try? Xiao Ayu touched her stomach and shook her head. I'm full and don't want to drink anymore. Tuanzi. But it still took out a spoon and scooped a small one for little Ayu to taste. Xiao Ayu extended her little tongue and lightly tapped. It's sweet. Xiao Ayu looked at Tuanzi, her eyes wide open, and she thought to herself, wow. This water is initially a bit sweet, but as it progresses, the taste becomes lighter and less noticeable. Halfway through, Tuanzi looked at Xiao Ayu and said, why don't you drink? After tasting a little, Xiao Ayu felt as if her mind wasn't as dizzy anymore. She reached out her hand, holding a spoon, and looked at the ball floating in the air. Give it to Auntie. Auntie. Tuanzi tried to recall, and there's also brother. They gave themselves soup, and she also wanted to give them sweet water. Tuanzi. Don't take it out now, you'll spill if you're lying in bed. Under the command of Tuanzi, Xiao Ayu returned to the room and slowly dressed herself. Although she may seem small, she can do many things, such as wearing clothes and shoes, pulling and pulling, making blankets, sweeping the floor, and watering flowers. She knows a lot. When Xiao Ayu got dressed and climbed out of the bed, Tuanzi asked her to drink 2 spoonfuls of water. Xiao Ayu felt that it wasn't as cold outside anymore. Tuanzi didn't give her a spoon and said she couldn't take it out, so she filled the room looking for something that could hold water. Finally, she found it. Time setting. 1 cup of tea equals 10 minutes. 1 stick of incense equals 30 minutes, end of this chapter. Chapter 5. Falling. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Falling. Lu is in the room, holding a bandage in his hand and a sewing basket next to him. Half a month ago, she fainted while working, and it was only after seeing it that doctor who realized it was a miscarriage. She had been pregnant for over a month and was no longer pregnant. In order to make a living for his family and also for the Lu family to have good things to supplement their health, Wang Chuanman went out with his elder brother and planned to trap prey. As a result, the prey was not caught, and the dry food brought out was also consumed. The 2 of them suffered from hunger for 3 or 4 days. Instead, he picked up a doll and came back. Mother said, you should also be careful during your confinement. Don't do these things, be careful not to hurt your eyes. Wang Chuanman had just returned from shoveling snow when he saw Lu sewing clothes. Lu said, I'm already doing well, I just want to make a small dress for Ayu. The swaddle wrapped around the child's body is not brand new, but the material is good. Lu decided to use it as an lining and cut her original wedding dress to make 2 pieces of clothing. Wedding clothes are just ordinary red cloth, not pure red, winning over cotton. Wang Chuanman looked at his wife's serious attitude towards making clothes and couldn't help but say, I still had some regrets in my heart. I shouldn't have brought the doll back. Our family is too poor, it has caused hardship for our family and children. When Lu raised her head and looked at her husband with a hint of surprise, Wang Chuanman continued, but seeing you all so happy, especially you, your spirits have improved, and I think it's worth it again. No big deal, he can always save the child stuttering by having a meal every 2 days. Moreover, since the day I picked up Ayu, my family has subconsciously become more frugal. Everyone wants to save their already limited food and earn a child's life with the heavens. Lu's tears were about to fall again, but she quickly wiped them away and lowered her head to prevent Wang Chuanman from seeing them. I just feel like she should be my doll, she said the doll in her belly had no fate with her. The doll in her dream appeared and she said she couldn't lose anything. Well, then let's take good care of her. Wang Chuanman was still grateful in his heart. Fortunately, the other brothers in the family understood him and didn't compete with him for a doll, otherwise he wouldn't know how to comfort his wife. There are 7 grandchildren in their family, but none of them are granddaughters, which is naturally rare. The couple was talking in the room when Lu suddenly felt something and looked at the door. There was a little person at the door, holding something and walking cautiously on the ground. Bao, be careful. Chuanzi is really heartbroken. Ayu held the thing in her hand and nodded at the air. The courtyard of the Wang family is an open piece of land. Just after shoveling snow, the ground is exposed, which is the ground after being compacted with mud. In the distance, there was a partially cut bamboo fence that was crushed by the snow. Old Wang, along with his eldest and third son, was planning to dismantle all the bamboo fences and use them as firewood. Wait until spring, then chop new bamboo to make it good. Ayu, Lu shouted urgently, which surprised the people outside. Turning around, I saw the little man dressed thinly and walking in the yard, holding in hand a small night pot. That is an unfinished small night pot, originally carved by old Wang Tu and intended to be used by Qilang. Ayu heard Lu's voice and stopped in place, her head tilted. Seeing Lu, she smiled sweetly and shouted, "Auntie." Lu subconsciously replied, "Ah." Mrs. Wang patted the head of her eldest son next to her and said, "Are you still staring like a hammer? Go and take Ayu back into the house. It's such a cold day and they don't wear much, even when they're outside, they feel like they can't bear it." And over there, Wang Chuanman also rushed towards Ayu at the signal of Lu Shi. Ayu was a bit confused. She didn't know why people on both sides rushed towards her. She felt a little nervous in her heart, and her little hand also grasped what was in front of her. Wang Chuanfu and Wang Chuanman both ran in a hurry, and the snow was slippery. They didn't stop, but instead collided. With a loud bang, Ayu, who was originally standing steadily, sat on the ground with a thud. My face was full of confusion, I didn't know what was going on. The thing in hand naturally didn't hold steady and rolled forward with a gurgling sound. That is a small night pot made of bamboo, which is also cylindrical in shape. After cleaning in the snow, the ground is particularly smooth, and it rolled all the way. Ayu struggled to get up and chased after the night pot, but Wang Chuanman didn't care about the pain anymore. He got up and hugged Ayu in his arms. Just as I was about to leave, I felt my collar being pulled. Wang Chuanman lowered his head and met the doll with light golden eyes. Innocent and innocent, with a small urgency. Ayu pointed to the small night pot that was still rolling forward. Water. The water that needs to be given to the aunties and nurses to drink is still inside. Strange, why didn't the water spill out? Ayujin couldn't have considered such a complex matter, he only knew that it was important water and couldn't be lost. Tuanzi also felt a bit helpless. A few spoonfuls squeezed out of the space, and the doll drank 2 spoonfuls. The rest was all put into the night pot by her. Fortunately, the weather outside is cold enough, and as soon as we go out, the water freezes into ice. The freezing point of Wanling water is lower than that of ordinary water, but it cannot withstand the cold winter and 12th month. Go and pick it up for your sister. Wang Laosan shouted to Wang Wulang next to him. Wang Wulang immediately ran away, but the thing rolled too fast and instantly fell into the drainage ditch below. The ditch naturally solidified, and the heavy snow covered it. No one noticed that a huge creature was swimming rapidly along the drainage ditch. The small night pot made of bamboo had just fallen into the drainage ditch when the solidified spirit water inside jumped out. The huge creature swallowed it in one gulp without even thinking about it. Everything only happens in an instant. Upon hearing any movement, the eyes of the behemoth rolled, revealing a cold light. No, it's dangerous. Tuanzi felt unusual and suddenly made a sound. Ayu struggled to get down, but Wang Chuanman just let her down. The little man ran forward again. Perhaps Wan Lingshui had an effect, and her movements were not as slow as before. She also had some strength when running. Everyone doesn't know what she's going to do, and it's not easy to force her to stop. Ayu ran a few steps, feeling a bit tired, and fell to the ground with a loud bang. Then, like the little night pot, it rolled forward with a gurgling sound. Oh my! Stop it! The Wang family is busy approaching. Ayu rolled and knocked down Wang Wulang in front, and now the two of them rolled down together. Everyone only heard a loud bang, and both of them fell into the drainage ditch. Hurry up, hurry up. Lu's eyes were torn apart as she wished she could throw the doll. It was still Wang Chuanman who ran the fastest. He was about to jump down the road when he saw a scene that made him shiver. Mother! Wang Chuanman let out a strange cry that had changed its tone. Everyone also happened to rush closer. I saw both children sitting steadily, and Wang Wulang was about to pick up his sister. Ayu sat on the head of a huge python, trying to reach down and catch the small night pot that had fallen. The python's head is as big as the doll's body, and its body blocks the spacious drainage ditch. She didn't see the night pot and thought it had fallen under the object in front of her. Because of being too focused, I turn a blind eye to the sounds around me. However, at this moment, the python was bleeding from its mouth and nose, and the snake's messenger was hanging outside with its eyes tightly closed, clearly suffocating. Is anyone watching? Can I see you with a recommendation ticket? End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Fuhua. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Fuhua. Wang Chuanman was first startled for a moment, and quickly reacted. He jumped down one by one, pulling Xiao Ayu and Wang Wulang up. Lu also approached and hurriedly hugged little Ayu in her arms. Mrs. Wang quickly said, "You take the child inside first." The weak at home all went to the stove to sit down. The old lady asked her sons to burn the bamboo fence they had taken down, and a fire was also set up on the stove, boiling hot water. Combined with the strong sun rising outside, the room feels a bit warm inside. The remaining members of the Wang family felt foolish looking at the python corpse in front of them. The old king was cautious, afraid that the python might just faint. He went over and brought a hoe, and smashed it hard at the snake's head until his brain was full before giving up. "Mother, we've never seen such a big snake before." Although they were leaning against a house on a cliff with a mountain range behind them, they haven't seen such a big python in these years. This snake is half the width of an adult's arm, and because its body slides along the drainage ditch, its length is also easy to estimate, about 10 zhang long. The python is obviously hungry and has a flat belly, but its body is very thick, with the thickest part being similar to the size of an adult. Oh my goodness, this must be 10 zhang long. Wang Chuanfu took a cold breath. There's one more thing that everyone didn't say, this python looks like it weighs at least 1,000 pounds, not to mention anything else, python meat can be eaten. This winter, with it, I'm afraid it's much better. Old Wang squinted his eyes and said, "Let's pull it up first." It's said to be melting snow, but it's not as fast either. The world around is still icy and snowy. The weather is cold, and snakes are already cold-blooded. It won't be long before they completely freeze, which is when trouble arises. When several men went to catch pythons, several wives of the Wang family were also looking at the stove door. Xiao Ayu took the small night pot and found that the water inside was gone. Her mouth slightly deflated, feeling a little disappointed. The thing she wants to send out is missing. Lu looked at the child's lethargy, so she wrapped her up a little more tightly. She has never been a mother before, and because she wants to have a child, she likes to go and hug the village women on a daily basis. She has learned some experience, and now she is holding the child with a good attitude. While holding her, she hummed an unknown tune while Xiao Ayu rubbed her eyes, and soon fell asleep. Feng moved the fire basket towards Xiao Ayu and looked at her small arms and legs. After realizing that there was no harm, he lifted her clothes and said, "I heard that the bigger the snake, the less toxic it is. I think that big snake can eat it, thanks to Ayu." Xiao Ayu used to call herself before, so everyone followed her and shouted. "Ayu, Ayu, isn't it just being obedient like pearls and jade?" Xiao Zhang was a greedy person, but now he also said, regardless of whether it can eat or not, it's better to die full than to starve. It seems that our family has picked up a lucky doll. Ma played with the fire in the stove and said, if it weren't for Ayu, something big might happen this time. Everyone nodded, and even felt some lingering palpitations. Isn't that right? If it weren't for Ayu's rolling and falling, maybe the python would have jumped up and the people in their yard wouldn't have fallen well. A one-zhang python can even kill a person, let alone such a big one. Just sweeping over with one tail, you'll either die or be disabled. How can you be as peaceful as now? The only thing they don't understand is that during winter, all the wild animals in the mountains hibernate, and snakes, who are afraid of the cold, even hide early. Why did they suddenly come out and have such a big one? Are you really starving too much? Lu just listened to them and didn't interrupt. My subordinates tapped lightly, their eyes looking at the doll in their arms with extreme tenderness. After a few days of raising it, the doll's fever subsided and it no longer turned red. Its dry and thin appearance became even more apparent. The supposed round face didn't show much flesh, and the skin was a bit pale. Perhaps due to the fire, it looks a bit more rosy now. I have gained weight, it must be very beautiful. There are still a few sweet potatoes at home, simmer them for a few children, Feng said, and Ma had already thrown the hidden sweet potatoes into the stove, hiding them in a place without an open flame. The yield of sweet potatoes is only slightly higher than that of ordinary grains, but I dare not eat too much of that thing. Not to mention, eating too much makes me feel bloated, my stomach also turns sour, and I get hungry quickly. Moreover, the stock is not very large. We were discussing in detail here, and a few people over there had already painstakingly dug out the python. Fortunately, the snake's skin was very thick, and a part of it stuck to the edge of the drainage ditch without peeling off its skin. Dad, how are we doing this? We've never done this big before. The snakes we usually catch are only about 1 meter long, and their thickness is just that. Old Wang said, "Are you stupid? How did you do it before, now do it." A few sons are working hard again. Before, of course, they would peel the skin first. At that time, they had already been scalded and peeled. The python was so big that it couldn't be scalded and could only be done bit by bit with a knife. Aunt Hu-san was originally lying at home. Their house was considered the closest to the old Wang family, but there were also more than 10 or 20 zhang on both sides. Usually, she couldn't hear small movements, but she couldn't even shout out loud noises. Their family is lying in the room, not eating much in winter. Everyone can stay still and stay in bed to save energy and keep warm. Why are you flipping back and forth? Hu-san, the husband of Aunt Hu, frowned. Your move has run out of heat and gas. You want to chill me to death. Aunt Hu rolled her eyes behind his back and said, I'm just thinking about the old Wang family. With so many people and grandchildren, winter is already difficult to endure. With so many girl movies, how can we still survive? What are you doing with all this? You think that old lady didn't beat you enough? Isn't it true that our third son won't come back? We can survive the winter with just enough food at home, but we can't starve to death. Aunt Hu-san pouted and said, that stubborn donkey must not have starved anyone in the family. Don't starve her to death by then. Last summer, the third son almost ran out, and it wasn't her. Before Aunt Hu could finish speaking, Hu-san slammed the blanket over his head and said, all right, come on, I'm so annoyed. Aren't all the keys with you? If you want to give something, you can go and give it. Anyway, when our family goes hungry, we'll starve you to death first, you big-hearted person. Aunt Hu put on a piece of clothing and went down to the ground. She turned her head and saw her husband lying in bed, putting on his dirty coat that was covering the blanket. Then she took the key and went to open the door of the grain cabinet. She picked up a small cloth bag from inside, weighed it, and scooped out another spoonful before walking out. At the end of old Wang's house, I could see Mrs. Wang pulling at tree roots from a distance behind the house. Zhang Lufzi. Mrs. Wang's surname is Zhang, and Aunt Hu would occasionally call her that. Mrs. Wang stopped pulling at the tree roots when she heard Aunt Hu's voice and said, "Jiang Dahua, are you itching again? I'm free now, come over. I'm too lazy to argue with you." Aunt Hu San threw the bag in her hand on the ground, lifted her foot, and walked back. After taking 2 steps, she turned back and said, "Remember to return the bag to me. Also, this can be considered a loan from you. You should pay it back more in spring." Mrs. Wang was suspicious and walked over to pick up the bag. She saw that it contained a bag of millet, which was not crushed into rice and weighed about 10 pounds. Writing requires understanding. Civilized society, not eating wild game. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Grain Delivery. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 Grain Delivery. Hujia village is one of the most impoverished villages in the entire county and even the entire town. No matter how poor other villages are, at least there is a small landlord who can have 180 acres of land, but who family village doesn't. The wealthiest village chief's family only has 10 acres more land than others, and the whole family is just enough to grow. Half of the house is made of blue bricks and half of stones, and once it is built, it becomes poor. Due to poverty, every household has no surplus food, and the snow has been blocking the mountains for a month without truly freezing. Even if they want to sell iron to exchange for food, there is no way out. Therefore, food is equivalent to life. Mrs. Wang was only stunned for a few breaths when she saw the food in the bag. "This Jiang Dahua. You come back, take the things back." Mrs. Wang took a few steps forward, grabbed Aunt Hu, and stuffed the bag into her arms. "You look down on me. What's wrong? Our Wang family is not hungry enough for this." Aunt Hu's heart was still dripping with blood, but she was unexpectedly pushed back. Upon hearing Mrs. Wang's words, she immediately blurted out, "Who doesn't know how many pounds and liang your family weighs? Half a big kid, poor old man, you have 7 in your family. You're lucky, you even picked up a girl's movie." Actually, she really wanted to talk about losing money, but after being chased and beaten several times by Mrs. Wang all over the village, she changed her mind. Along with what the other few in the village said, they all changed their tune. "That broom really hurts hitting me, it's embarrassing to be chased after. You shut up for me, I'm in a good mood today. I have plenty of strength to deal with you." Mrs. Wang heard that she was going to talk to Xiao Ayu again, and the little emotion in her heart was immediately blown away, leaving only a trace of anger. She immediately extended her thin claws towards Aunt Hu San. "Oh my, what's going on here? I don't know how many days it will clear up this day, but it will save me a lot of effort. I don't want to celebrate the Chinese New Year anymore." A voice from Tsang Lao came in. Mrs. Wang had just grabbed Aunt Hu's hair and, upon hearing the words, let go. She slightly adjusted her sleeves and turned her head to look, but it was Mr. Hu, followed by 2 young men. The 2 young students each carried a backpack, but their steps were relaxed, so there wasn't much inside. "Mr. Hu, are you coming out to bask in the sun? How did you get to this end?" Mrs. Wang glanced at the 2 young students again. "Are you going to the mountains to find something? Although it's been sunny for a few days, the snow in the mountains hasn't melted yet. You still shouldn't go in and be careful not to fall." Mr. Hu is a charitable elderly person who is a senior member of the Hu family and has a high reputation in the village. Mr. Hu touched his beard and shook his head, saying, "I'm afraid it won't be clear for 2 days, and there will still be snow." Originally, Grandpa Hu brought 2 offspring and brought food from door to door. When Mr. Hu was young, he was a teacher in a private school. Later, when he returned to the village, he saved up some wealth, which was not very rich. Retirement was enough. Sometimes when people are really poor and unable to cook, some may come to their doorstep for help with a thicker skin, and Mr. Hu will also give a helping hand at his discretion. I discussed with the other end of the pillar, and the snow has not melted. The road to the town is also very dangerous. I joined forces with a few clan elders, gathered some food, and shared some of the difficulties with each family. At least we managed to get through these days. Last year, more than 10 people starved to death, and I feel heartbroken. Zhu is the nickname of the village chief. Mr. Hu actually came to deliver food, and he followed along, perhaps with the intention of inspiring everyone. There are over 100 households in Hujia village, with a total of over 700 people. Last year, there was also heavy snow blocking the mountains. 5 young people who went out to search for food froze to death, and 12 starved to death in the village. No one dares to mention it much. As early as when Grandpa Hu came over, the old prince over there saw it from afar and quickly followed him. Mr. Hu usually doesn't talk to these village daughters-in-law, he just spoke out just now because he was afraid they might start fighting. "Wangzi, you've come just in time. Bring in your family's grain." Grandpa Hu asked the younger generation to take out a bag of grain, and he himself brought out another bag. "Your family has picked up a daughter, and I'm afraid the grain may not be enough to eat. This bag is more than enough to supply you. Not every household has it, it just depends on which one is more lacking." Upon hearing about Grandpa Hu's visit, old Wang thought of the python still peeling in the yard and turned his head to look at Mrs. Wang. Mrs. Wang naturally knows what he means. If the pythons were to eat at home and survive this cold winter, there would be no problem at all. But if it's divided, how should it be divided? You are the head of the family, so it's naturally up to you to decide. Mrs. Wang felt a little angry and turned around to take away the 2 bags of grain from Mr. Hu's side, and then snatched it from Aunt Hu's arms. Aunt Hu couldn't help but say, Hey, Zhangwufzi, the old master has already given your family food. This is our family's, you give it back to me. I don't want to go hungry yet." There's no agreement to borrow or take it back. Mrs. Wang rolled her eyes and turned her head before leaving. "Borrowing me grain is your blessing." This has made Aunt Hu very angry. This old lady can hold a grudge against her for so long with just a word of losing money. But soon, Aunt Hu became angry because old Wang invited her and Grandpa Hu to the outside of the Wang family gate. Everyone was dumbfounded when they saw the giant pythons filling the entire yard. Nyangli. The half-skinned python really caught the eye. Aunt Hu couldn't resist the stimulation and fainted directly. Old Wang rubbed his hands and said to Mr. Hu, who was almost unsteady, "This was killed by our family's AU. We only keep 300 pounds for ourselves. How do you divide the rest?" He really wants to keep more, but he has to let the big guy make it through this period of time. But Mr. Hu didn't even hear the last sentence. "Who is AU? Oh, I forgot to mention that the doll we picked up was named AU. Grandpa Hu's eyes widened and he said, "What? Isn't that just a baby in my arms? Can you kill such a big snake? I'm afraid it's not a reincarnation of immortals." Mrs. Wang carried 3 bags of grain and went to the stove with some frustration, then talked about the python. The expressions of the several daughter-in-law were different, but they didn't think there was anything wrong with dividing the python meat. Their family is the poorest in the village and also the one receiving the most assistance. The arrogant Mrs. Wang doesn't often ask for their help, but that doesn't mean they don't need to remember those favors. Even half a liang of meat could save a life. As everyone looked at the sleeping little doll, they couldn't help but think to themselves. Isn't saving someone also a blessing for this doll? Ayu Mimi slept for a while, and when she opened her eyes, she saw Mrs. Wang by the stove, muttering incessantly. Jiang Dehua earned this bag from Ayu. Don't worry about it. After grinding rice, she will cook congee for her. Poor girl, even if she wants to eat mantu, her family can't afford it. My face was just too smelly, not like expressing concern for others, but rather full of unwillingness, sadness, and resentment. The little man got out of Lu's arms, took a few steps with his feet, and grabbed Mrs. Wang's sleeve. Ah nai. Mrs. Wang lowered her head and saw the doll with sleepiness still on her face, looking at her very seriously. Ah nai, don't be unhappy. The little man reached out his little hand and hugged one of Mrs. Wang's legs with great effort, while his little finger lightly patted her. When I grow up, little Ayu stretched out her hand and compared her head. Then she thought about it carefully and said, give Nai a lot of mantu. For your old little Ayu's life goal. To grow as tall as a Nai, to have an endless supply of mantu, and to add a bowl of egg vegetable soup. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Splitting Meat. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Splitting Meat. Ayu's milky speech made the whole room blush. A few older brothers couldn't listen anymore. Sister Ayu, in the future, my second brother will make money for you and make you eat baozi every day, big meat-filled baozi. Yes, yes, there are still endless eggs to eat. Buy a lot of eggs and put them at home. I'll make pancakes for you every day. Mantu is also good, but it must be white flour mantu. I heard that white flour mantu is the best mantu. It is very sweet, sweeter than sugar water. A few precious brothers spoke one by one, leaving little Ayu confused and her eyes wide open. She quietly broke her little fingers and remembered all of this in her heart. But in fact, Xiao Ayu still has some doubts. She seems to have heard that the best food is not white flour mantu, nor big meat stuffed buns. What is it? Ah, she can't remember. Anyway, just remember what my brothers said in the future. The little hand tapped her head, and little Ayu stopped thinking. She turned her head and leaned back into Auntie's arms. First, she cautiously moved over and found that the auntie did not push her away or cough heavily. She then approached a little closer. Auntie seems to have changed a bit, but she hasn't seen her for a long time. She doesn't have any medicinal smell on her body, is she okay? When Auntie recovers, her body will be fragrant. When Auntie embraces you again, Auntie can't cry, be good, someone once said to her while coughing. The sound is getting farther and farther away, and it is also becoming more and more blurry. Lu felt the child's closeness, and her already fulfilled heart immediately softened and hugged her tightly. Auntie, little Ayu raised her head and timidly shouted. Lu sure. What's wrong? Auntie, little Ayu shouted again. Lu continued to smile and whispered, Auntie is here. Xiao Ayu stretched out her hand and hugged her slightly bent neck, using force. With his little head buried in it, he happily said, Ayu, I found you. Lu was stunned for a moment, not knowing what was on her mind. She replied to her in a louder voice, Auntie has also found my family, Ayu. From now on, we will never be apart again. Several wives turned their heads and rubbed their eyes. Xiao Zhang let out a low sigh and said, You're also a poor child. Mrs. Wang tapped the spatula in her hand on the edge of the pot, making a dull sound of bang bang bang. Hurry up and cook. I still need my mother to serve you. Just as he was speaking, there was another noise coming from outside, but the village elders and the village chief arrived. Mr. Hu couldn't resist the stimulation and asked the two younger generations to call the village chief and others, sitting in the hall. The ones who come are all those who can speak in the village, and the others haven't called yet. How to deal with so much python meat needs to be discussed in advance with a constitution. Mr. Hu is the only scholar with great achievements in the village, and coupled with the fact that Hu is the largest surname in the Hu family village, he is naturally highly respected. Seeing everyone gathered, Mr. Hu, who was sitting in the main seat, cleared his throat and said, "In theory, I am only a member of the Hu family. I shouldn't be sitting in your main seat. Today, I will have the audacity to sit." Old Wang sat next to him and hurriedly said, "No, no, no. We came to Hujia village and you helped a lot." "Humph, I can't speak either. Let's talk about how to divide it. The villagers are not so particular, and Mr. Hu doesn't like to shout out loud. On weekdays, when we talk, we basically don't need to use honorifics to avoid feeling uncomfortable and uncomfortable listening. Okay, everyone has come today, and you probably know what's going on. It's the granddaughter of the old Wang family, call. Lao Wang too added, Ayu, the doll's name is Ayu. Yes, Ayu, this doll is blessed. Grandpa Hu sighed and continued, you have all seen the things in the yard, maybe even if there is not 1,000, there are 800 pounds. According to Wang Zi's suggestion, they will keep 300 pounds for themselves. What I mean is, leave 400 pounds for them, and for the rest, each household will share 1 pound first, and then see which one is lacking severely, and share more. Several elders nodded, and one of them said, we are some of the better off in the village. If you like to eat this meat, you can discuss with the villagers and exchange 1 pound of meat for a few pounds of grain. This meat is not for satisfying your cravings, it's for saving lives. Another tribal elder leaned on the ground with a cane and stomped it before saying, you all need to remember that no matter how you get this meat, it doesn't fall from the sky, it's given by the old Wang family. Those who get the meat should remember their kindness. If any of us are too few or envious of them, we old folks haven't even gone to the ground yet. It's still possible to expel a few people from the tribe. If these words were not spoken harshly earlier, and if something really happened later, it would be their fault. You can't let someone cut the meat and cause a lot of fishy smell. The other young people also nodded along, their words understood, and they didn't think anything was wrong. Python meat, it's very nutritious. Taking a bite can warm your body a lot. If there are weak individuals at home, they can also be raised with snake soup, maybe this winter will be over. Old Wang, despite his calm demeanor, was already shaking his hands under the table. He is an honest person, and his harshness over the years is just to support a family, standing up in a daze. Many major events, it was Mrs. Wang who held up the show. Mrs. Wang doesn't want to appear today, it can only be him alone. He was very afraid in his heart, afraid that everyone would only leave a little for their family, and also afraid that actively dividing the meat would cause trouble for the family. Believing in the villagers in one's heart is one thing, but facing them is another. What if? How can human nature withstand trials? Quickly, everyone agreed on the specific regulations. The entire village was not particularly large, and the population was not particularly large. They were all aware of the situation of each household. Next, we will notify all households to come and pick up the meat. The sunlight outside hasn't dissipated yet, and I heard that even the laziest man was kicked out of the house by my mother. Hurry up and get it. One person can take a bite, and it can last for a few days. Your mother still wants to celebrate the Chinese New Year. The big guy was moved when he heard that the meat was given by the Lao Wang family. The Lao Wang family is the poorest in their village. Surprisingly, I still remember their kindness and don't own it. Some people only shared 1 pound of meat and were dissatisfied. No matter how large the population of the Lao Wang family is, do they need 400 pounds? Our family only weighs 1 pound, and they only weigh 400 pounds. Before he could finish speaking, he was punched by the person next to him and said, just say one more thing, take this from your family. What are you looking at? Are you dissatisfied? Do you want me to ask for you? What did the old master and his team say? The person in charge of supervision heard this and said directly, the clan elders have already agreed. Who would think they are not convinced? Leave the meat behind, and people will leave the clan. How can one survive being expelled from the tribe just to order meat? Now, a small group of people with objections have also been suppressed. We have never seen such a big guy before. He is a fat pig that weighs up to 200 pounds all year round and is already fat and strong. They estimated that the python weighed over 1,000 pounds, but everyone cut and weighed it in batches, but the total weight was greatly unexpected. There aren't many people in the village who can read and do arithmetic, but it's still Mr. who can calculate. After calculating, Grandpa Who took a cold breath and said, not to mention anything else, the meat alone costs 3,686 pounds and 722 yuan. Someone said, hiss. Maybe you've become a snake fairy. Some people gritted their teeth and said, people are almost starving to become immortals. Are you still afraid of eating snake immortals? Anyway, I'm not afraid. I can still take 2 more bites. If I were to starve for a few more days, the old Wang family would never dare to take it out. When everyone saw the food, they were afraid they would have to fight for it. More than 3,000 pounds of meat, the Lao Wang family kept 400 pounds, and each family divided 1 pound first. They also gave a few extra pounds to those who were particularly short. As a result, there were still over 1,000 pounds left, and all the meat that was distributed was pure meat, while the rest was bony meat. Mr. Hu directly added 10 pounds to each family. When dividing meat evenly, it is divided according to each household, regardless of the population of that household. So even the smallest family has 11 pounds of meat, and they dare not buy so much during the Chinese New Year. Now, no one really has any complaints. White picked meat, who doesn't care? Peeling off the skin of the python, it weighed 50 pounds, including its belt and blood. There aren't many internal organs, adding up to over 30 pounds, but the snake bile is terrifyingly large, weighing over 10 pounds. The snake skin and gallbladder were purchased by Dr. Who's family from the old Wang family. I gave them 20 taels of silver. These are both good things, and the python and snake bile are even better. The price of 20 taels of silver is actually quite low. But no matter how much, Dr. Who's family cannot afford it. Lao Wang's family doesn't know how to deal with it, and it doesn't hurt to sell it. He only said, when Dr. Who comes back, let him show us Ayu's health. This article is entirely fictional, with unified measurement and control. 1 jin equals 10 liang, 1 zhang equals 3 meters, 1 stone equals 150 jin, 1 yuan is almost equal to 1 yuan, the price is set in the text, end of this chapter. Chapter 9. Returns. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9 Returns. Not everyone came empty-handed. When everyone learned that they wanted to divide the meat, they all took some things to some extent. For those with slightly better conditions, I dug a few spoonfuls of grain. If the conditions were average, I took a bundle of firewood. Most of the people who came were men. Later, when they brought the meat back, capable wives drove them back to bed, put on their coats, and headed towards the old Wang's house. With brooms and dustpans in each hand, they quickly tidied up the courtyard of the old Wang family. When the big guy was tidying up, old Wang's family was already having dinner. Feng looked at everyone busy in the yard and felt a bit guilty. He quickly drank the snake meat soup from his bowl and turned around to clean the yard. The daughter-in-law in the yard saw that she was coming and quickly said, "You've been tired all day today, so let's take a break. Don't move. With this little work, we'll finish it in a little while. The weather is cold, so hurry up and go back to sleep." Feng felt a bit uncomfortable and turned to look at her mother-in-law. Mrs. Wang scolded her and said, "I haven't weaned yet. I need my mother to nod for everything. Get back on your own." She lost over 2,000 pounds of meat all at once, and her heart was in pain. There are many people coming from the village, and she has been tired for a whole day without doing anything. Now she is not in the mood to make long and tiring remarks. "Sister-in-law, there's enough snake soup today. Come on, drink 2 more bowls and sleep warm at night." Xiao Zhang smiled and walked out, pulling foam back and greeting a few daughters-in-law in the yard. Thank you for your hard work. There is no intention of asking for help at all. Other wives don't think anything of it. What's the hard work of getting something good? It's not worth mentioning at all. Go to bed earlier, burn 2 bamboo baskets at night, I'm afraid it will snow again this day. The wives quickly cleaned up and put the things in the yard away before leaving. The villagers brought over 20 bundles of firewood, enough for them to burn for the Chinese New Year. The people of the Wang family were also tired. After eating and drinking, they packed up their things and each went to bed. There was nothing to say overnight. Early the next morning, Lu was helping Xiao Ayu dress. Xiao Ayu shook her head and said she could. Auntie wants to dress you, Lu sure said softly as she looked at little Ayu's self-reliance. I didn't take care of Ayu before, but I will make up for it in the future. Xiao Ayu just put on a sleeve for herself, and upon hearing this, she glanced at Lu Sure. Taking off her sleeves and placing them in Lu's palm, the girl's soft voice fell to her ear like cotton. Auntie, help Ayu wear them. Lu's face immediately rippled with a big smile. Ah, good. After putting on her clothes, Lu saw her hair growing halfway up her waist, with a tail resembling dry grass. She simply took a pair of scissors and cut off all the dry areas. She wrapped the cut hair in cloth. The remaining hair was made into a small bun using 2 pieces of scraps to create a floral pattern. After Xiao Ayu walked out of the room, she had 2 small bags on her head, with 2 light red cloth flowers on the outside. Adding a small face, it looks like a lucky doll stuck on the door. Oh, this is our little Fuhua. A cheerful voice sounded, and little Ayu turned her head to look. She saw a chubby ant holding something in her arms, smiling and looking at her. Mrs. Wang next to her waved to little Ayu and said, Ayu, come over. Xiao Ayu walked over and leaned against Mrs. Wang's leg, hiding behind her, revealing a small head to look at people. This is Auntie, it belongs to the village chief's uncle's house, said Mrs. Wang. Xiao Ayu timidly shouted, Auntie. The village chief's wife is a neat person, and they have 2 maids in their family, but none of them are good. Looking in front of them. I couldn't help but feel in my heart that it was indeed a painful sight. No wonder those 2 brothers from the Wang family would pick people up and raise them. If their leader had seen it outside, they might have picked it up too. Aunt Wang, it was too late yesterday and I was afraid it would disturb your sleep, so I came this morning. Last night, our sheep gave birth and only milked these sheep. You can bring them to drink, explained the village chief's wife. She first handed over an oiled paper packet, which contained fresh sheep milk that had already been frozen. Then, she took out her things from her arms and said, We have given birth to a few little lambs. In this situation, not only the lambs, but also the mother lambs are almost unable to raise them. It's just that there are several children in the village who have lost their milk, so we can't kill them in one go. This little lamb, let's give it to your family. Although it's not big, it can still be used to cook soup for the children for 2 to 3 days. The village head's family has a relatively small population and just enough stored grain. The sheep, chickens, ducks, and pigs they raised before have already been killed and eaten, and some have been sold and given to the villagers. The remaining sheep, being pregnant with a cub, thought to wait until it gave birth before milking the sheep. There are several daughter-in-law in the village who have just given birth, with insufficient food and no milk, all pointing to this single sheep. The newborn lamb is only intended to keep the healthiest one as a comfort for the ewe, and the rest is prepared to be eaten. The lamb brought by the village chief's wife was not big either, trembling. It seemed to have more air output and less air intake, and it was uncertain when it would disappear. Xiao Ayu's eyes lit up slightly when she saw the milky white lamb. When the village chief's wife saw it, she walked over and squatted in front of her, watching as little Ayu didn't completely dodge. Then she smiled and said, Your name is Ayu, right? Thank you, you are our little lucky star. Xiao Ayu blushed shyly as she knew she was praising herself. The village chief's wife left her things and didn't stay much. Mrs. Wang gave the lamb milk ice cubes to Feng, and asked her to cut them into pieces. She heated the pot and melted the water, then warmed it up before giving it to Xiao Ayu to drink. As for the little lamb, it was thin and couldn't stand steadily, weighing only 3 to 5 pounds. It seemed like it couldn't survive. Give it to Ayu first, stay close to her. At least she hasn't died, so there's a warm basket. When she dies, she'll take it to make soup for Ayu. The Wang family has no objection to the old lady's decision. Until she was placed in a chair and stuffed with a little lamb, little Ayu didn't even realize it. Why did she have an extra buddy? Tuanzi laughed heartily in the space and said, "Little kid, take a little kid. That lamb doesn't seem to be able to survive, it's about tonight." As soon as I turned my head, I saw that the previously unremarkable water was slowly rising again. I quickly ran over and squatted down to watch. In the future, I will rely on this thing to prolong my life. Xiao Ayu doesn't know what to do or not. She watched the little lamb tremble all the time and thought of how she used to tremble when she had very few clothes. She thought for a moment and quietly pulled open a corner of her clothes, putting the little lamb's tail inside. Grasp the little lamb's paw again and gently blow air towards it. Ha, ha, the hot air blows to you, we are not cold either. The Lao Wang family now has a truly abundant supply of food, with 400 pounds of snake meat piled up in a small warehouse, as well as an endless supply of firewood and various miscellaneous grains weighing over 100 pounds. Since the heavy snow capped the mountains, the haze that has been weighing on everyone's hearts has finally dissipated. Taking advantage of the warmth at noon, Mrs. Wang pulled out all the family members and told them something. The 20 taels of silver given by Doctor Who's family, as you all know, I'm afraid I had already thought about it last night. That's how I planned it. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Snowy Night. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 Snowy Night. The Wang family would naturally think about the 20 taels of silver they obtained from selling snake skin and gallbladder. If they were to think about it, it wouldn't be enough. There is no separate family, and all the money is under the care of the old lady. Everyone has been poor for years and doesn't think they should have a lot of money in their hands. Our family doesn't have much wealth. Over the years, we have been treating our second son and your father, and we have also suffered from many famines and debts. I plan to use this money to pay off our debts. The poverty of the Lao Wang family was not caused by one or two things. The second son of the Wang family has been paralyzed in bed for almost 5 years. When he was young, his head fell ill. Since last year, he has been walking with a limp, and sometimes his head is covered in pain and sweat. Many times, he cannot do anything and still needs to be nurtured with medicine. Not to mention so many people, who has a headache and a headache, even if they only use 10 or 8-1, it is still a huge expense. Encountering Corvée, the 3 brothers took turns to go. The Corvée task was heavy, and every time they came back, they would fall seriously ill. They had to take care of it for 1 or 2 months to recover. Over the years, they didn't save any money and instead owed more than 10 taels of silver. It is said that in addition to these on the surface, parents also owe a large amount of money, but it is unknown how much, who the creditor is, and when it will be paid off. If parents don't say it, they don't dare to ask. Mrs. Wang didn't plan to calculate with everyone, she just said, our family owes more than 13 taels of famine, which should be paid back. We can even contribute 15 taels of silver with interest to pay back to them. The eldest family owes 3 taels of silver to your mother's side. When spring comes, you can go and pay it back with the eldest family. The second family. After discussing everyone's division of labor, Mrs. Wang said, the remaining silver will be kept at home for use, but no one is allowed to think about it. Just treat it as non-existent. I know what you're thinking. It's freezing cold now, and there's absolutely no food in the fields. Neither of your parents are wealthy, so you must be living a tight life. Mrs. Wang looked at the whole room of daughters-in-law, and regardless of their expressions, she sternly said, I don't care what you think in your heart, but at this critical moment, no one is allowed to eat inside or outside. All the meat, food, and even firewood we have are from our old Wang family, and no one should think of taking them to their parents' house at this time. Even if your parents are starving soon, they are not allowed. Otherwise, I'll kill you here today. I understand. Did you do it? The second daughter-in-law Ma's eyes narrowed. She really thought about ordering meat and food from her mother-in-law and secretly sending them back to her mother's house. Her mother's family is even poorer than her husband's, maybe even her poor old lady is starving to death. I ate what I ate. Xiao Zhang opened her mouth wide, and before she could finish speaking, she was frightened by Mrs. Wang's cannibalistic gaze. Xiao Zhang is the niece of Mrs. Wang's maternal family, and both of her surnames are Zhang, so everyone calls her Xiao Zhang. Are you the only one who is kind? Are you the only one who cares about her family? Mrs. Wang looked at her with resentment and then glanced at Wang Chuanfu. Boss, tell her why. Wang Chuanfu exclaimed, well. Third brother and sister, we went out before and the village outside was already eating children. At that time, they weren't very short of food, and even asked if there were any children in our village who wanted to exchange food. These words, he didn't want to say, afraid of scaring people. Speaking of which, Wang Chuanfu couldn't continue. The snow is too heavy, and everyone is afraid of death. If they are afraid to a certain extent, they dare to do anything. Xiao Zhang's face turned white instantly. Eating people. Dare to eat people before they run out of food. If there is really a shortage of food, knowing that she brings food to her mother's house, can her mother's house be well off? Even the Hu family village where her mother-in-law's family is located, everyone also understood this point and dared not have any other thoughts. Mrs. Wang saw that all these daughters-in-law were frightened, and she reminded her sons a few more words before everyone dispersed. In a few more days, it will be the Chinese New Year. The villagers got snake meat and their mood improved. They began to prepare gradually. Coarse grain cakes, glutinous rice balls and snake meat balls were all made one by one. For those who have corner fabrics at home, they also pull the red cloth into strips and hang them on the surrounding branches. Mr. Hu was also in a good mood. He took out some of his inventory of red paper and wrote a couplet for each household, symbolically collecting a penny. Everyone posted Spring Festival couplets, which looked quite popular. In the blink of an eye, New Year is approaching. The elderly were right in their prediction. On the 29th day of the Lunar New Year, a heavy snowfall with goose feathers came again. This snow was bigger than any before, and the boiling snowflakes soon covered the ground. The newly frozen snow has solidified again. The village chief called on the young and middle-aged people in the village to patrol the village, asking everyone else to retreat to their houses if there were no major issues. The whole family, regardless of gender, age, as long as there were no disagreements, they all crowded together, at least to be warm. Xiao Ayu was also wrapped up 3 layers inside and 3 layers outside by her family, making her curl up in bed. That little lamb hasn't died for several days, always nestled in little Ayu's arms, warming each other up. Seeing that it didn't mean to die, the family even gave it some paste, only a few bites, barely hanging it. That night, little Ayu felt the little lamb twitching in her arms, so she took some water from the space and held it in her palm to give it a drink. The little lamb raised its nose and greedily licked it, then licked little Ayu's palm back and forth. Because it was too itchy, Xiao Ayu tried hard to hold back her smile, afraid of waking up her family. In the past 2 days, Xiao Ayu has fed the little lamb 2 or 3 times with water, and the little lamb's spirit has become more and more full, and he has become more powerful in his struggle. Xiao Ayu still wanted to give water to his mother and the others to drink, but she never found a chance. The elf also said, "Never let the family know where she brought it from, otherwise they will be swallowed up." Xiao Ayu dare not take it directly. The little lamb drank water and seemed to have endless strength. He broke free from little Ayu's hand and jumped onto the ground. The door of the bedroom is not a door, but made of completely unusable old cotton wool and bamboo strips. The little lamb crawled out from the bottom soft cloth. Little lamb. Little Ayu became anxious and shouted softly, ready to follow. "Bao, you haven't put on your clothes yet." She actually wears quite a bit. After all, the quilt at home is not warm enough, only the thickest face coat is not put on. "You'll be freezing outside." Unfortunately, no matter how Tuanzi shouted, little Ayu didn't pay attention. She only felt that the lamb was missing. The winter nights are very dark, and the Wang family doesn't have the money to light oil lamps. The surroundings are pitch black. Xiao Ayu crawled out of the bed, pressed the blanket, and followed her memory to find the door to the bedroom. She is going to find the little lamb. The little lamb is her playmate. "You go back." Tuanzi was in a hurry in the space, spinning around. This little brat's stubbornness really gives it a headache. Xiao Ayu hurriedly stepped on her shoes and left the bedroom, but the sleeping Wang Chuan man and Lu Shi did not feel it. She was coaxed by Tuanzi and drank 2 spoons of Ling water every day. Now her body is very healthy and her vision is also good. Outside Wang Chuanman's bedroom was the courtyard, and as soon as Xiao Ayu came out, the cold wind hit her. Xiao Ayu trembled and surprisingly walked forward with determination. Because she vaguely saw the shadow of the lamb. "I'm really afraid of you." Tuanzi had no choice but to activate the limited energy in the space and make a warm protective cover for Xiao Ayu. Xiao Ayu suddenly felt no longer cold, but she no longer had the energy to care about it. She just followed the footsteps of the little lamb forward. The cover burns all the energy of love, and the flesh of the dumpling is in unbearable pain. If not needed, this brat will soon freeze to death. Just as Tuanzi felt helpless, he suddenly felt a special energy. Sigh. What is that? Bao, that's the direction, fast, fast, fast. Someone needs your help. No, 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 you go back, call the adults to go back. You go back first. End of this chapter.